votes expected to take place over the coming days, starting with the so-called meaningful vote on the Prime Minister's Brexit deal with the EU. Second meaningful vote, which MPs are meant to take part in tomorrow. And to discuss this in a little more detail, given what's happened today, I'm pleased to say, by Jill Rutter from the independent organisation, the Institute for Government. Jill, thanks for waiting patiently to talk to us. Now, we're in a position today where the Prime Minister's now gone to Strasbourg to have another round of urgent talks with Jean-Claude Juncker. Should we read into that, in your view, that there's something possibly in the offing in terms of a new gloss or a new agreement around the withdrawal agreement?
I think very much so. Prime Ministers don't get into motorcades and speed off towards Northolt with the cameras trained on them unless they really think they're going to have something to show for it at the end. So I think this is not so much negotiations. I think it's much more likely to be the Prime Minister and Jean-Claude Juncker unveiling whatever has been agreed between the negotiators over the weekend. And this morning, of course, one of the things this has done is push today's timetable back enormously. So we've been waiting for a statement by the Brexit Secretary, Steve Barclay. That's now not expected until 9. So the government's motion for tomorrow's debate hasn't gone down yet. So we're on tenterhooks to see what the Prime Minister is actually going to have to show to us.
So the 9 o'clock statement tonight will be based on any agreement that's reached between the Prime Minister and Mr Juncker. Is that it? Or would there be a point to make a statement if there hadn't been an agreement? I
think there's been a statement due all day before the motion tomorrow, because the government's going to have to explain to the Commons what actually it's going to ask them to vote on tomorrow. But I think the fact that it's been delayed, the fact the Prime Minister has gone to Strasbourg, is there's a bit of orchestration, a bit of theatre in Strasbourg perhaps, followed up by this Commons statement. And then we'll see what motion the government is proposing MPs to deal on. Remember, there's been speculation about whether MPs would actually be voting on her deal, on some sort of notional deal of the deal the UK would like to see, perhaps not yet agreed. So the Prime Minister may manage to pull off the trick of putting forward a deal. And we've also heard stories of people being summoned into Downing Street to be given a bit of a preview to sort of, try and line up some of that support from the people who've been most sceptical about the Prime Minister's deal to date.
We spoke to Mr Duncan Smith earlier, and he was quite carefully saying what he might or might not be looking for in any new kind of, or any revised deal, if you like. Do you detect that there's any change of mood today? Do you detect that there's any kind of vibe coming out of the Palace of Westminster that people might be looking forward to something that is more of a meaningful change that they've got so far?
We'll wait to see, and obviously the European Research Group have said they've got their team of lawyers lined up to scrutinise. So the first act will be, what does Geoffrey Cox, the Attorney General, say? There was quite a lot of pressure on the junior DexU Minister who was answering questions in the Commons today, an urgent question from Jeremy Corbyn, about when would MPs see the legal advice from the Attorney General? Will they actually have very much time to scrutinise it? So we expect that legal advice. We'll expect lots and lots of lawyers then to be doing their own bit of scrutiny to say, actually, does it amount to anything? Is this more of an excuse for people to back down who may have wanted to find a reason to back down, or is it actually anything of substance? And then we'll see the motion. Then we'll see as well what MPs do to the motion tomorrow. The other thing that people were very worried about was they wouldn't have much time to look at that and lay all their amendments, because everything is going massively to the wire today.
And then if you add on to that, as Nicky Morgan was saying earlier, the huge legislative challenge that follows any approval of a deal, are we then looking inevitably at some kind of extension of this process or not?
We probably are, because the deal won't be sort of signed, sealed and delivered until next week. The European Council, European leaders will probably have to find some way of endorsing it. The withdrawal agreement bill is quite a complicated piece of legislation. The government might think that it's going to be a lot easier to get it through with time pressure on MPs, because there's a lot in that MPs will probably not like when they look at the detail very much. But I think the Prime Minister herself has been talking about a bit of a technical extension. So I think the government is warming us up to say, well, if it takes a few weeks more, we're still leaving, we're actually leaving in good order. It's much better to get the statute book ready than to try and rush everything through at too much pace.
Jill, good to talk to you as usual. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.